going, guys. This is awesome. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Bose Professional live stream series, where we're going to talk about some additional features of the L1 Pro line, our brand new portable line array family. Today, we're going to talk about the L1 Pro mixer, as well as the L1 Mix app and ToneMatch mixers. Very excited for my two special guests today, the first of which is Brian Sennett. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Craig.
Brian is an electrical engineer on the Bose Pro team, who also was the lead electrical design engineer. So he was had some very important decisions to make regarding the L1 Pro family electrical design. So welcome. Brian is also a very talented violin player and keyboard player. So he's able to have that perspective of musician as it applies to using portable PA systems. So thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
And then our second guest is the one and only Mike Dawes from the UK. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, pleasure to be here, guys.
Mike is a very unique fingerstyle guitarist, acoustic guitarist, who does has a wonderful YouTube channel where he does lots of interpretations of popular tunes, as well as his own really unique compositions. One of which you heard in the lead up in the on the title frame. Called William Shatner's Pants. You have a brand new release called Shows and Distancing live in the USA that was just released, offering lockdown lessons. Guitar Player magazine says he's jaw-dropping, and Guitar World magazine says he slaps, taps, and caresses his way to brilliance. So welcome, Mike Dawes.
Thanks, Craig. You should do all my introductions from now on. That was lovely.
I will. I'll send you a contract and we can maybe work that out. So we're going to get right to talking about the L1 Pro and the mixer section on those portable line array units. As most of you folks know, we've got the same mixer section on the L1 Pro 8, the L1 Pro 16, as well as the L1 Pro 32. So what we'll do is we're going to queue up some animation here, and I'm just going to kind of talk us through the mixer. So here's the back of an L1 Pro 8 unit. You can see at the top, we've got kind of the main control, which are rotary encoders. These are knobs that are push buttons that you push to select volume, treble, bass, and reverb. There's an LED ring around them that indicates your position. And then there's a signal clip indicator below that green kind of hashtag that you see. We've got channel mutes on each section, on each channel. We've also got ToneMatch selectors for selecting default dynamic handheld mic as well as piezoacoustic guitar. Combo input jacks for channels 1 and 2 with phantom power. Channel 3 is our Bluetooth and streaming channel. So this is where users would stream their Bluetooth content from phones, tablets, laptops. Also has a 3.5 millimeter stereo summed input jack and a 1/4 inch mono input jack. There is a system EQ section, which optimizes for different types of music or content that's going to be played through the system. We've got a USB port for firmware upgrades, XLR, full bandwidth line out, ToneMatch port for connecting to T4 or T8 mixers, and then, of course, an on-off switch here on the bottom right. So, as I said before, we've got the same mixer on all three products. So I'm going to the first question I'll kick over to Mike. As Mike, you did a really nice video for us for the L1 Pro 8. Hope you enjoyed your time with the products. I just wanted to ask you, just kind of right out of the bat, how would you describe your experience in using that mixer of the L1 Pro 8?
Well, yeah. First of all, thank you so much for sending it out. It's actually, you can just see the shadow of it in the corner there. The shadow of the, there we go. There it is on the nice wide angle there. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah. Well, as a guitar player, PA system. The words PA system was almost sort of a scary thing. You know, when you grow up with just amps and guitars, PA systems always required a little bit more of a specialist knowledge. So the first thing that I'd say with regards to the interface is that it's incredibly easy to use, and you can clearly see from the graphic before that that's the case. When I took delivery of it, I actually had a friend over here in lockdown in the UK at the time. We were permitted to mix with one household, so I had one person that I was mixing with at the time, and he's a non-musician, but he's an avid music fan. So I kind of left it over to him to play something through it, through I think it was Spotify on his phone. And that's always a nice test of usability when you hand it over to a non-musician. And for years, I was actually using the previous version that you had here. This is my old T1 mixer. Forgive the pink tape and graffiti. This has been on the road for a long time, actually. So sorry, Brian, your baby's been vandalized by tape and Sharpie. But the interface is, yeah. Well, the interface, the difference is very apparent. This is clearly a lot more fiddly for an instant sound and an instant performance. Whereas, on the new line, very, very simple to use, within arm's reach wherever you are on stage. So that's the first impression. The second of all was that those preset EQ selectors that you have on the back allow for a very, very quick sort of just EQ session, really, just to dial in what it is that you want very, very quickly. So all in one, great sound, as Bose are known for. It's just, I feel like I've just propped up Bose things, but I honestly haven't. This is what I use for my reference mixes, actually, guys. First generation sounding. But yeah, you got the Bose sound, but the interface is what was really impressive to me when I took delivery of it. So yeah.
Awesome. For those familiar with Mike would know that he also has a T8 ToneMatch mixer in his pedal board, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this session. The idea for behind the new mixers obviously was just giving users greater control, more versatility, but also to have it be just extremely easy to use with little to no learning curve. Full functionality of a mixer, yet kind of a leap forward in terms of channel delineation and access to parameters. Brian, question to you. We are able to accommodate mic level and line level signals on channels 1 and 2 via the combo jacks. You want to talk a little bit about that, and why we don't need to have a selector switch that users would select line level or mic level?
Yeah, so our founder, Dr. Amar Bose, said something that I think a lot of us at Bose are familiar with. He said, to be better, you have to be different. And it's really cool to hear Mike talk about why this interface is better in a lot of ways. It's not as scary for a musician, and it's usable for a non-musician. And you want to be able to plug it in, power it on, and go. And we are different, so it can be a little bit scary for us too to make something like this. Most of the time in a mixer of any sort, you'll usually see two kinds of controls. And the first control says what kind of an input do you have, and how much preamplification do you want. And then the second control is how loud do you want to be. And in our case, with the L1 Pro series, we have one control, and it's how much do you want me as the speaker to amplify you. So it kind of combines both of those. The reason why you usually have a couple of different controls is you have two different gain stages. And gain staging is the art of being able to work with a limited dynamic range. There's only, any electronics inherently has a noise floor. It's got some level where if your signal's quiet enough, it's just going to blend into the noise. So if you amplify your signal, you will amplify the noise as well. So you can split up your gain stages so that you can get a loud signal without also having a loud hiss that comes out of your speaker. So typically you do that with either a mic line switch or a gain knob, is what you usually see on a traditional analog mixing console. And that answers the question of how much preamplification do you want? So for a dynamic microphone or something with a really quiet input signal, you apply a lot of preamplification. And then you can use your fader or your level knob for how loud do you want it to be. But if you have a hot professional line level signal coming in from a mixer or from a keyboard, you don't need hardly any preamplification at all. And that's why you would have a mic line switch or a gain knob. But in our case, we don't want people to have to worry about that. You want to just be able to say, hey, speaker, I'm going to plug in something. I'm going to tweak this knob to get you to the loudness that I need. And we take care of the two gain stages under the hood to make sure you can still get good signal to noise ratio without having to worry about setting your gain separately. We actually did this in the S1 Pro. We had a single knob with a single jack that's a combo jack that can do micro line signals. And it handled that with two analog gain stages. But the problem is, unless we basically stick a big motor onto the side of the thing, we have a hard time controlling it with the app. So we need all digital control. What we did in the L1 Pro series is we broke it down to an analog gain stage and digital gain stage, and those are all digitally controlled. So you can turn the knob, or you can turn the knob in your app, and you'll get that real-time control, combining both gain stages into one with still just one knob. So you plug in whatever you want, you set the knob at the level you want, and you can get it however loud you want.
Okay, that's a very thorough and just fantastic explanation. Could you maybe talk about simply 1, 2, 3 sentences about, I've seen some users who comment how they can hear the noise floor changing, say after you're strumming a very loud, aggressive acoustic guitar, you can hear the noise floor and then it goes away. What's happening there?
Yeah, so that's a little feature that we have inside where we have our digitally controlled preamplifier that is designed if you have it set kind of loud and if you're strumming your guitar really loud, or if you've got a signal coming in that's really hot, we'll back off that gain a little bit so that you avoid distortion. So that's something that we do under the hood, and it's not going to mess with your level while you're playing, but sometimes because it is changing the gain in response to a loud signal that's coming in, if you suddenly back off, if you strum a hard chord and then you let it ring, you will sometimes hear, if you're listening really carefully, you might hear that noise floor shift just as a result of that control being activated.
And that's intentional. That's just simply because if we don't need that noise floor or that gain stage to be at that level at that point, we're not going to use it.
Absolutely.
One more question. You're in the hot seat, Brian. One more question for you about noise floor in general. What are some like best practices when connecting products to, let's say, an L1 Pro 32? That's a really loud system that in a quiet environment you are going to hear the noise floor, but that, of course, that benefits you later in an actual performance environment because the ambient noise around you exceeds the noise floor.
Yeah, I think as you get to a loud system like any of these, but especially the Pro 32, you might be up close. If you have your channel 1 or 2 volume set up at maximum or towards the top of the dial there, really you're saying, I expect to be plugging in something that's going to be pretty quiet, like a dynamic microphone again. And I want a lot of amplification. So you start with something that's really low level, and then you want it to come out really loud. So if you have that knob cranked all the way up and you have a mic plugged in, it's going to sound really loud. We designed these volume controls so that the top of the knob represents pretty much the quietest thing you can plug in and the loudest you might want the speaker to sound. So you might hear that there's some hiss coming out of the speaker if you're listening up really close, but once you start sending a signal, once you start talking into that mic or playing that instrument, it's probably going to be so loud that you're probably going to want to start running away because that's the kind of sound that's going to fill a room.
Gotcha. Very good. So I'm going to move on to the LED ring that is around the rotary encoders that indicates your position. There are 13 LEDs, but each LED has 3 levels of illumination. The idea behind that was to sort of give users the feeling that they're kind of adjusting things in between the lines, as opposed to just 13 steps in volume or bass cut or bass add or treble cut, treble add. So volume will start at about 7 o'clock and increase all the way to about 5 o'clock, as will reverb. The bass and treble controls will start at 12 o'clock, and it's a cut and add situation. So we can add bass, we can add treble, or we can also subtract bass and subtract treble. But the LEDs, and this is reflected in the L1 Mix app as well. If you turn the knob ever so slowly, you'll see 3 levels of illumination. I know you have an L1 Pro 32
I do.
next to you, Brian. Maybe we can just show that. Might not be super obvious to see, but so if you turn that knob really slowly, you should be able to see LEDs, the 3 levels of illumination. Here we go. There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian.
Craig, could I just add something to the LED point there?
Sure, of course.
I don't think we've spoken about this before, but not many people would know, but I'm actually colorblind, right? And a surprising number of people with blue eyes are colorblind in what I have, which is very, very minor, but it's surprisingly common. And it's an improvement that I've noticed from the T1 through to the T8S and continued to this, is that all these different LEDs are much more obvious to myself under stage lighting conditions than the T1. I don't know if that was an intentional thing that you did, but I just thought it was worth mentioning just because it's something that you might not have, we certainly haven't spoken about before. But I went through a little test upstairs trying to mimic stage lights and some of the problems of being able to see exact levels, but also clip levels, you know, and the clip LED that comes on as well. And yeah, I'm not sure I spoke to you about that before, but it's yeah, definitely something that's very helpful for me.
That's great to know. It definitely was a major consideration in developing the IO panel and the brightness of the LEDs, so that it could be seen in
the size as well,
lit, and in the size as well. Yeah, poorly lit stage lighting, as well as outdoors in a really bright environment. You know, sometimes we've all got pedals where you can't really see if it's on or not. Sometimes I remember building a little paper tent for my LEDs on my tuner, just to make sure that I could see whether or not I was in tune while I was tuning. But that is very good validation. Thank you, Mike, for pointing that out about folks that have trouble seeing colors. So the adjustments, we've got volume, obviously, channels 1, 2, and 3. We've got treble and bass, cut or add on channels 1, 2, and 3. And on channels 1 and 2, we've also built in a medium hall reverb. Were you able to use the reverb on the L1 Pro 8, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Chet Atkins that said reverb is like talent. Like, more talent, please, in the mix. It's necessary. I mean, I'm playing acoustic guitar, but for any musician playing through this, reverb is definitely important. And I'm glad that you chose the reverb that you did. Is it the same reverb that was on the T8S, Brian, or is it a different version?
I think it is, right, Craig?
It's actually, it sort of falls somewhere between T1 and T4, T8.
Right. But it sounds great. Really easy interface as well, more or less. But as Yngwie Malmsteen said, how can less be more? More is more. So I'm always like things to be a bit wetter than dry, for sure.
You can't argue with Mr. Malmsteen. I'm afraid not.
How can that be? How can less be more? Is that
so the reverb is a nice medium hall, excuse me, a nice medium hall that is great for many applications. If users want more of a variety of reverbs, of course they can go to the T4 or T8S, which has many more selections of reverb as well as other effects. So let's talk about channel 3, which is our Bluetooth streaming channel. Brian, do you want to talk about how channel 3 differs from channels 1 and 2?
Yeah, so we pack a lot into channel 3, but it's not a mic channel. So it just doesn't have quite as much gain. It doesn't have that extra oomph that you need to preamplify your microphone. It does not have phantom power. But we really have 3 different inputs going to channel 3. We've got the 1/4 inch, which is more of your pro type mono balanced signal, just like what you'll see on the channels 1 and 2 on the 1/4 inch part of that combo jack. We've got the 3.5 millimeter, if you want to be precise. That's your stereo, more consumer. So if you've got a device that's putting out stereo, you want to plug it into there. And obviously we've got the Bluetooth. And you do have basically the same range of volume control on channel 3. It just doesn't have that extra overhead for mic gain.
Great. And there is no reverb on channel 3, which is what led me to asking you about channel 3. So channels 1 and 2 for mics and acoustic guitars, we do have the reverb option. And then channel 3, your line level Bluetooth streaming channel with bass and treble parameter adjustments. So we've also got, just kind of moving down the I/O panel here in my head, we've got the ToneMatch selectors, which are built into the unit default dynamic handheld microphone, as well as piezo acoustic guitar presets that optimize the EQ for those particular instrument slash microphone options. The same settings that are in the S1. There is additional functionality that we'll get to when we talk about the L1 Mix app that allows you access to the full library of ToneMatch presets that allow you to get much more specific. Phantom power on channels 1 and 2. So if you are using a condenser microphone, handheld condenser microphone at your gigs, now you have the option to use your L1 Pro unit. It's one button that powers both channels 1 and 2. Brian, can you talk about why one button for 2 channels?
Yeah, so phantom power, hitting that switch doesn't prevent you from plugging in a mic on a condenser mic, a one channel and an instrument or a line level source or anything you want on the other. And I should say, I think condenser mic is the first thing that comes to mind, but this can also be handy for powering phantom power DIs, so it really adds a lot of flexibility to the setup. Having the combo jack is kind of like having an XLR and a 1/4 inch jack. They actually are electrically different inside. So we don't apply the phantom power to the 1/4 inch, only to the XLR. So you can plug in any kind of 1/4 inch thing you want, and it's just not going to get that phantom power voltage on it. So you don't really need to worry about damaging if you're plugging in a guitar with a preamp, or if you're plugging in anything else with 1/4 inch piezo pickup or what have you. You don't need to worry about the phantom power being applied there. And the way the phantom power works on XLR is designed that it's not going to damage anything that is plugged into it. So a dynamic microphone can have phantom power applied, and it won't even sweat. The only thing that I know of that might not like phantom is a ribbon microphone. And if you own a ribbon microphone, then you probably already know don't apply phantom power to it. But otherwise, you can mix and match with that phantom being on both channels, and you should be fine.
So we're not going to blow up our SM58 by connecting phantom power to it.
I think it's impossible to destroy an SM58.
Right. Okay, so moving on to system EQ, which is in the bottom right quarter of the I/O panel. These are master EQs that are applied to the entire mix that users can implement to optimize for. We've got a setting which is off, which implements no master EQ. We've got live, which is optimized for live performance. It's essentially a little bump in the low mid range. We've got music, which is for recorded music, mobile DJing, or just listening to music in general, which is a little bit of bump in the low end. And then we've got speech, which is a public speaking setting, which is a bump in the higher mid-range. So all these just very subtle EQ tweaks to optimize for these use cases. We've also got a ToneMatch port, which is for powering your T4 or T8 mixer. Unlike the legacy products, which are not technically able to power a T8 mixer, all the L1 Pro systems will provide full power to a T8 mixer. With T4, you could run 2 L1 Pro systems in stereo because there are 2 ToneMatch ports on the back of a T4. The T8 mixer, due to its limitations and because it previously required a power source, which ships with the T8, that you could run one. You can connect it to one L1 Pro system. You can run them in stereo just via the analog connections. Mike, you are very familiar with the ToneMatch T8 mixer as part of your pedal board. But if you were,
Absolutely.
I'm guessing that's typically it's in your pedal chain.
Yeah, it is. It's something I discovered actually over in Austria with the T1. I think it was the original L1 system. Because of the amount of ins and outs that you had on those mixes, and the fact that you had things like compression and gates and just a lot more parametric EQ, things like that within one system, it actually made a lot of sense to apply it to a guitar pedal board, because what I'm doing with my acoustic guitars is running multiple guitar pickups into different channels on the mixer. So an electric guitarist would come out with a 1/4-inch jack, go into his pedals, and that would be a chain all the way through to front of house, right, or to an amp. Whereas myself, I have multiple pickups, so instead of having to buy multiple guitar pedals running in parallel to take that line, I was able to put it into the mixer first. But with the T8S, there was even more channels, so I was able to give some of those effects pedals channels of their own through the ins and outs. So I'd come out of one pickup, run it into a distortion, and then put that into its own channel for its own gates, EQs, and compression. So it really provided all the options I need, and then it comes out stereo, and then through the pedals accordingly. So I'm really familiar with the interface through that. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to run that into this system, of course. Very compatible. No issues so far, other than the fact that the pandemic has prevented me from being able to try it in a gig situation. But that will come, I'm sure, eventually. Fingers crossed.
So I'm not super familiar with your exact pedal setup, but familiar with it enough to know that I'm guessing that in lieu of, you're playing larger venues that have their own house sound systems, but if you were to play smaller venues where you're bringing your L1 Pro 8 or some outdoor events, you could keep that exact same.
Well, that's the thing. A perfect
on your pedal board.
Yeah, a perfect example of that would be workshops, masterclasses, things like that. That's actually where I discovered the L1 in the first place, was at a workshop in Austria where there were sort of 30 or 40 students with all their guitars, and we were doing a student concert night, and they were able to just go up, plug into the T1, select through the ToneMatch function. Okay, you've got a Martin Dreadnought. Let's just select Martin Dreadnought, and there we go. And then the students were able to just kind of come in, do their thing, go out, and we were able to keep that rotation going. No fiddling around, no faffing around, right? And that would be the same for me. I have my incredibly complex kind of EQ system all dialed in already, but I can just plug it straight in, and it's kind of one size fits all. Jobs are good, as we say here in Bristol.
We learned about your guitar clinic experience through the L1 Pro video, and the animation of you carrying logs.
The accurate colorized version, which was definitely not the opening sequence of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando. But
that's interesting. I got a Rocky 3 vibe from that scene in your video.
Oh, nice. Yeah. With the high fiving in the short shorts in the ocean with Carl Weathers. Great moment.
Oh my gosh, I made a mistake. Rocky 4, where he.
Where he beats communism with a boxing match. Yeah, that one.
Yes, exactly. So well done.
Thank you.
So we talked about compatibility with T4 and T8. Brian, how about T1 mixers and the L1 Pro series?
So L1 Pro can power a T1. It can power all of our ToneMatch mixers with that ToneMatch port. But we only have the full audio compatibility with the T4S and T8S. And this was kind of the evolution of our design, because we introduced the L1 legacy products with the T1 as a system to work together. And then we introduced the T4S and the T8S as an update to those. And they were designed to work with the legacy L1, except we couldn't fully power the T8S. So now we're able to have that full compatibility, that one cable connectivity with the T4S and T8S. But we were really designing L1 Pro to work with those more modern mixers. So the ecosystem for the L1 legacy products with the T1 actually handled a firmware update over that connection, because that was the only way you were able to update the firmware on the product, was with that ToneMatch connection. Now we can do firmware update over USB-C if you want. So we've made strides since then in how you update the firmware, and we don't need that. So the architecture has changed a little bit. So unfortunately, we're not able to get the audio from the T1 the way we've designed the products to work with the 4S and the 8S.
Great. So not totally obsolete, but less functional than a T4 or T8.
Right.
Okay. So the last few components of the I/O panel, we've got there's an XLR full bandwidth line out for passing signal to a second unit, or running a subwoofer, connecting to an S1, running a main mix into the board, perhaps, or And then we've also got a USB port that you referenced earlier, Brian. So for making USB upgrades, for making firmware upgrades via USB-C, via the Bose Bose Updater, which is on our an application that you can download at pro.bose.com. And then we've got the on-off switch, of course, which has some indications built in for limiting indication, thermal protections, as well as auto power standby, which is a European requirement that if the product is not in use for 4 hours, it automatically enters the standby mode. That can be disabled on the L1 Mix app, as well as on the product itself. If you just thumb through the owner's guide, there's an easy way to disable that. If for some reason you would like your product to remain on after 4 hours of non-use, you have the ability to do that as well. So I'm going to move on to the L1 Mix app now, which is, in a nutshell, it's an extension of the I/O panel on the L1 Pro products. We designed it to mimic the layout of the mixer panel on L1 Pro products, so that there was no learning curve. Once you know how to use the product, you know how to use the L1 Mix. Simple, intuitive. For obvious reasons, you are performing and you need to make some adjustments. You don't want to walk over to your unit, kind of interrupt your performance. You can just take the phone out of your back pocket. Maybe it's an iPad on a mic stand with your set list or some lyrics. You just make adjustments there on the fly. If you're a mobile DJ, you can kind of walk the room, make adjustments as you are hearing the mix, like your guests are hearing the mix. And also for performers who want to assign somebody to be their sound engineer for the night, if we're at a venue that doesn't have a dedicated sound person. So we've got a couple of videos here. I wanted to show, the first one is really just kind of an overview. It's a screen grab of the L1 Pro, the L1 Mix in use. So here you can see this is the main dashboard, and we can scroll through all the parameters. Then we grab the knob and we swipe up to increase, and we swipe down to decrease. Moving over to, there's a lot of reverb there on that channel. Channel 2, some adjustments here. Same thing. Then maybe we can jump out of this video and go into another video which shows, so one of another advantage of these rotary encoders is that it allows us to see all those volume, bass and treble adjustments in real time. So you can see as I am making those adjustments on channel 1, the LED ring on those encoders is moving at the same time. And then of course, as you select the parameters, it's also changing on the product as well. And then we're going to make some ToneMatch selections here. Some system EQs. And then we're going to mute channel 3. Zeroing the board here to reset everything back to out of the box.
That's incredibly handy.
Zeroing the board.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a big time saver for one, because you don't, and often you could miss the parameters because you have to literally go through and select every single one and bring them back to.
Happens all the time. Yeah, on other systems that I've used for a long time. Yeah, really handy that.
So we worked quite a bit on the connectivity. This is that Bluetooth Classic connectivity that is a data exchange, essentially. That allows us full control of the I/O panel. Brian, let's talk a little bit about our Bluetooth range and how we arrived at where we are.
Yeah, I'm proud of the Bluetooth range, and it's not something that we brag about actually, but I think it's pretty cool. And I think maybe more as things open up and you get around crowds and you start playing shows and you just get into spaces where you have more distance, it'll become more apparent. Thinking of the case where you're or you have someone acting as a sound engineer for you working on that app, you're probably going to be on the other side of a room full of people. If you've done well and you've got a good crowd, it'll be a room full of people. And that's one of the most challenging Bluetooth scenarios or wireless connectivity scenarios is to have one device on one side of a crowd and the other device on the other. And we were fortunately able to test this when we did have a crowd of people at the office. We went into our cafeteria and ran some tests at peak lunchtime. And we got some looks from people who wondered why we were playing loud music, but we told them it was product testing and they said it was okay. But we worked really hard on the Bluetooth reception for both the audio streaming and the control. So this means, probably everyone is unfortunately familiar with those hiccups that you get as you hit the end of the Bluetooth range. And that's not going to happen unless you walk really far away from the product, or if you're in a really challenging situation, if you're trying to go through a lot of walls or people. And we ran a lot of tests on this, and it does really well in a lot of different situations. The other really cool thing is, when you saw that video where your phone is just less than a foot away from the device, you can see how real time it is, but you can do that much further away as well, and it's still real time control. And if you start to get towards the edge of that range where it's at the fringe of reception, and if you try and make some quick changes back and forth, it's just going to try its best to be real time. It's not going to kind of queue up those changes and then end up with this huge delay where you get these unexpected changes. So it's still going to be as responsive as it can, even in challenging situations.
So our range is it's approximately 30 feet of distance from an L1 Pro unit to the device. Can be more than that depending on the environment, but that's a very useful range. Mike, I know you talked a little bit about the L1 mix in your video, and you haven't had a chance to play any proper gigs, but what are your impressions of L1 mix and how did you find it to use?
Well, first of all, the interface, very easy, and as mentioned, kind of gave control to a non-musician, which is always a good test. First of all, running through channel 3 there, and this is how I was initially testing the EQ of the unit, by playing something familiar. Always a really good test to kind of hear a new system is to play a song or a master recording that you know very well. And then kind of see how it goes. But then obviously exploring the menu further, one page of really, really simple options. Obviously, you've got the phantom power that Brian mentioned is applied to both channels, the first 2 channels. And then the ToneMatch list, again, very familiar, very easy to use. Channel 1, channel 2, mic and instrument options, and just works straight out of the box. I mean, I've worked with apps in the past. I've actually developed a few with an app developer teaching guitar, and ease of use is everything, especially in situations where you're actually using it in a live concert setting. You're not just fiddling with it at home. It's clear that the app has been designed to be used as a performance tool as well as something to rehearse with, and having that on a mic stand, or actually I tour with Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues. And our keyboard player has an iPad permanently mounted on her keyboard that she runs some sheet music from and has some cues on. So something like that is a very real situation where that would be really, really useful. Say we were to do something like a secret show at a smaller location running something like this. I can just see it working really effectively based on experiences and fiddly accidental button presses that I've had in the past. Ease of use is everything in those situations, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to get the sound from here, through your fingers, through the instrument, to a load of stuff to the audience, and you want to minimize the barriers there. Right. And one common barrier is just fiddly stuff that you have to keep track of. And this is why it's just a much easier interface to use for someone that really has no experience with a PA before.
Articulated brilliantly. Fiddly stuff, minimizing fiddly stuff. Yeah. In addition to all the things on the product that you can do with L1 Mix also allows you the ability to do additional things, such as saving scenes. Scenes, for those familiar with their T4 and T8 mixers and T1, are essentially just settings that you assign to a particular venue, a particular set list, or a particular song that are optimized for that space. So you just go in and recall that scene the next time you are in that space or playing that set, and then your setup is considerably easier. We've got a video that is a screen grab showing how you access the ToneMatch library. I'm sorry. So next topic, I got ahead of myself. How you save a scene. So if we can cue that video. So here's a screen grab, and I'm just going to create some settings here for my imaginary gig. Got a microphone plugged into channel 1, adjusting my reverb now. And then channel 2, I've got an acoustic guitar plugged into it, adjusting treble, rolling off the bass, adding some reverb. Going to mute channel 3, and then saving the scene. So I pressed the little scene button on the lower right corner, and then I'm going to name my scene. In this case, Exhibit a local brewery in town that is a great venue for loud music. Save it, and then the next time I play at Exhibit A, I can simply recall that scene. And so if I recall that scene and I decide that I need a little bit more volume on channel 2, you'll notice a little little orange check mark that indicates I've made a change to the save scene, and then I can just simply disregard that when I'm done, or I can save that as part of the scene moving forward. And here's an example of same thing. So saving scenes, the L1 mix will say, when we save a scene, we save everything, volume, treble, bass, as well as ToneMatch presets, as well as house curve settings or system EQ settings. The only thing it will not save is a phantom power setting, which is just something that you have to turn on every time you plug in, because you may not be using a condenser mic and may not need that phantom power at every single gig. So that is saving scenes, really powerful. Another thing that you can do is access to the ToneMatch library, which we kind of hinted at earlier on. But so T4 and T8 have ToneMatch presets that we worked with manufacturers on, some that we created ourselves from Shure, from Sennheiser, from Audix, from Taylor. Specific presets optimized for very specific microphones or specific instruments. So we've got 2 other videos that we're going to show. The first is a screen grab to show you how you navigate the app and access ToneMatch presets. So let's see this first one. Let's say I have a Shure SM58. I go to the settings, select the channel 1, select the microphone bank. I select the Shure folder and SM58. Boom. So now every time I turn on my L1 Pro system, when I select microphone on the ToneMatch presets, I have an actual SM58 engaged, an SM58 ToneMatch setting engaged until I reset that or change the preset. And then here I'm selecting a Taylor acoustic guitar on channel 2 to optimize for that instrument. And then we have one more video of essentially the same sequence, but I'm just going to show you what happens on the product. So we select settings, go into channel 1, and then here I'm selecting that Shure SM58, and you're going to see the LED on the product change to green. It blinks to indicate that a change has been made, and then it settles on a solid green, so that when I power up the product, I know that I don't have just the default ToneMatch settings. I've got something special loaded on channels 1 and 2. So really powerful tool to have in your L1 Pro toolbox if you don't have a T4 or T8. So Mike, if you were ever gigging with a super stripped down or your guitar clinics, and you happen to use these ToneMatch settings, you could still access those on your L1 Pro system via the L1 mix.
Yeah, and there's a couple of ways I would do that on an acoustic as well, actually, because you have the mics as well as a variety of pickup presets. I noticed because of the multiple pickups I have, I could either take, say, I think the Taylor Grand Concert finger pick preset sounded quite nice on my guitar, as well as the default acoustic piezo. But then the second channel, I would mess around with some of the mics you have if I was actually using a mic outside the guitar as part of that particular event. If not, I would use my magnetic pickup and run it into something like the LR Bags M1. You have a bunch of M1 presets on there, which is a really great sound hole pickup, both active and passive versions. Yeah, it would be fun to play around with that at various sound checks and see what kind of juicy combination I can get. But yeah, certainly I don't need the full pedal board to get a great acoustic guitar sound out of this thing. I think I'd miss some of my bells and whistles, like my wah-wah pedal and things like that. But it can all be added together.
Cool. So you can connect multiple L1 Pro units to one mobile device and control them via L1 Mix. Brian, do you want to talk about that at all? Like how many units can we connect to a single mobile device?
Yeah, there's no limit on, or at least no limit that we know of, on how many you can connect at once. So on the homepage of the app, you have all the different devices you have, and you can go there and select between them, and then you can have them all powered on and connected, and control them all at once from the app.
Great.
That's amazing.
One
I
question.
didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. You simply just kind of back out until you see the product cards. Then you just select the one that you want to control.
Right.
Brings you to the dashboard.
So somebody watching this video needs to go out and get like 80 L1 units, link them together, and see if it works.
Test what Brian is telling us.
Exactly.
One question that I have seen with regard to L1 Mix is, can we hook a couple of L1 Pro systems up in a stereo pair? Like S1, we can do stereo pairing with the Bose Connect app. Currently, there is no stereo pair option. To be in stereo, you would have to hardwire via mixer. Obviously, T4, we just mentioned you can connect to via ToneMatch. There's a strong possibility that may appear in an app update in the near future. So, but as of right now, there is no stereo pairing option. So I'm going to move on to connection to the ToneMatch port that we talked about a little bit. But first, let's show the pretty glorious pedal board of Mr. Mike Dawes.
The embarrassing pedal board of plywood, Velcro, and cable mess. Oh, look at it. It's like noodles on the floor. I'm sorry, everybody. It's so messy.
It does the trick. And the audience doesn't get to see this. They just care about what they're hearing. So here we can see proof that Mike Dawes does in fact use a T8 mixer on his pedal board. I don't know if you want
to. Pretty beautiful wiring there.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll go with that.
It looked pretty neat from that perspective.
Yeah.
Neat in terms of organized. So.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was because Premier Guitar were coming, so I did some housekeeping.
Video courtesy of Premier Guitar, Mike's rig rundown, which you can also find on YouTube. I know we've talked about your setup a lot. Do you want to mention anything else about your?
Sure. Well, could you cue up that video again? Is it possible to play that again? I just wanted to comment on something there, if it's possible. So obviously the mixer is the thing in the middle, the big brain of the unit. You can see I've got this little sticker on the top of the mixer that says OCT and OD. That's referencing myself that channel 4 I've turned into a channel for the octave pedal, OCT, and OD stands for overdrive. So this is me telling myself that channels 4 and 5 have been assigned to specific effects pedals, as I mentioned earlier. And then you can see on the screen there, it says Kunz with Whammy. The Kunz is the brand of the guitar that I play, and with Whammy is referencing the Whammy pedal that I have in the bottom corner there, the Digitech Ricochet. And that's just one of many presets that I have. And that I was dialing in throughout that specific tour. So that's, you can see I've recorded the preset. Everything's working as fine, as planned. You mentioned that you wouldn't run, or currently you can't run the new L1 Pro in stereo. But what I would do with this is, out of the outputs, I would set my pan levels within the mixer, and I just send the left output to one unit and the right output to another. So. Right. Just to be clear, it does work if you just do it like that with an external source of panning, which you would get in the T8S. So that's something I wanted to mention just in case it's not clear to people. Yeah, and other than that, thanks for the compliments about the very dirty pedal board, which hasn't been used for quite some time now, unfortunately. But
That's brilliant. That's a really unique setup. And for anybody that's ever seen you perform live, or just even seen clips of you performing live on YouTube, it does the trick. You're getting some really unique sounds.
Well, shout out
And
to
it
the
seems-
guitarist. I must just give a shout out to the guitarist Thomas Lieb from Austria. I'm actually wearing his Guitar Camps T-shirt right now because that was what introduced me to this workshop where people were using the L1, and he started using it on his pedal board, and it's been adopted by so many people in the fingerstyle community because it does just that. You know, has enough ins and outs with enough features and scenes, and yeah. So shout out to all the Bose fingerstyle crew because I know they're out there, and some of them may be watching this.
That's awesome. Brian, do you want to talk about what is a ToneMatch port connection?
Yeah, so it's actually a type of connector called EtherCon, which if you're kind of a pro audio type of person, you might be familiar with. It's just a standard Ethernet RJ45 connector that's wrapped in a rugged shell, just like an XLR connector would have. And the cable itself is also kind of pro level. If you get the ToneMatch cable from us, it's nice and flexible. You can coil it right up. So if you do lose that, you can use any kind of Ethernet cable, but the ToneMatch cable is kind of ruggedized, so you can stomp on it and do whatever else you want to do at a gig. And it carries the power supply for the mixer on some of the wires, and then it carries this the digital audio signal from the mixer to the L1 Pro power stand. So it's everything in this one ruggedized cable from the mixer to the L1 Pro.
And if I lose my ToneMatch cable, what else could I use?
Any old standard Ethernet cable, Cat 5, Cat 6,
Wow.
Cat 5e, what have you. So if you've got one of those hanging around the house, the idea is, we do have some of these kind of special proprietary cables, but you always have a backup with standard cables that you might have around the house if you lose it, or in the unlikely scenario that it breaks.
They don't look quite as cool as a ToneMatch cable, though.
No, those things look kind of cool.
But totally functional.
Yep.
So we also we talked about a few use cases using a T4 with two L1 Pros, the limitations of the T8. While it is a more powerful mixer with the 8 channels, it does only have the one ToneMatch port. And then, of course, we did talk about the sort of half compatibility with a T1 mixer. And with that, we have reached the end of our agenda as far as L1 Pro mixers, L1 Mix app, and T4, T8 ToneMatch mixers. Any final thoughts from Brian? Start with you.
It's been a good long run making this product come together, but I feel like we really built on the real legacy that we have with the L1 systems. It's really cool to see all the love we have out there from people who have used these and are still carrying them around, and are getting so much usefulness out of them when we've taken everything that people love about the L1 and built on it. So I think we've built something to last, and I can't wait to see what people are able to do with these.
Awesome. Very good. How about you, Mike? Some final thoughts?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on, and it's so good to meet Brian there and see the workshop where this thing was created. A little window into the mad scientist that is Brian. I don't know if you are mad, but mad and scientists go together a little bit, and they're just like mad and guitar player. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. But and thanks for making a great update to the L1. I was introduced to portable line array systems with, I think it was the Fishman SA220 back when I was still at school, and then obviously the L1 after that. So it's nice to see a continuation and improvement upon the design. One thing I was going to touch on that I don't think you guys touched on was just thanks for making it portable. It breaks down as incredibly lightweight, which is what you want for something like this. That's why I got into the portable line array world to begin with. At the time, I was working with a harp player, so we had a huge amount of the van taken up by a giant 47-string concert harp, and these systems kind of break down and tuck into nooks and crannies in vehicles. So it's incredibly practical and packs the punch. So yeah, I don't think anyone touched on the weight in great detail, but well, you saw Brian hulking out there earlier, lifting up the sub to show you the panel. I don't know if he's been working out or not, but it looked. There we go. There it is. Easy to bench.
Indeed. Yeah, we thank you, Mike. Yeah, we the L1 Pro, the L1 in general means a lot to just thousands of performers out there. And when we were developing this new line, the L1 Pro line, we were very, very, very conscious of what those users love about L1 systems, particularly how they sound, the sonic footprint. So we didn't want to change that too much while we just wanted to kind of improve its performance. L1 legacy products are extremely portable. We wanted to make this new family, often like performance and portability kind of compete against each other. So it was definitely a challenge to make them even more portable, but yet perform even better than the legacy systems. But with the use of the slightly smaller array drivers, as well as the racetracks that give us this nice slim footprint, we were able to do that as well. And then of course, what we're talking about today, the evolution of the mixer panel and giving users clear channel delineation so that it looks like a kind of a mental model, we say, of a traditional mixer where you've got channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, but really just simplifying it so that there are less knobs, there are less LEDs, so that it's just really kind of, it's really intuitive. I overuse the word intuitive, but you guys can probably attest the arrival at a gig when you don't have a crew setting up your gear for you, but arriving at a gig, small local cafes, clubs, bars, breweries, whatever, and setting up your own gear before you actually play is hands down the most stressful part of the evening, at least from my experience. And whatever we can do in terms of ease of bringing things into the venue, ease of setting it up, and then also just ease of dialing in something that sounds fantastic was really first and foremost the objective here with the L1 Pro systems. So thank you very much for the kind words, Mike. Anything on the horizon for you, gig wise, or I know you are.
That's the big
you're
question,
also
isn't it?
some lessons.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
lessons?
keeping busy. Yeah, well, like many touring musicians, kind of our whole world's a little bit upside down. Well, for everyone, the world is upside down right now. But it's right now. It's February 2021, so we're looking to emerge maybe this fall with some tours and things like that. But I must admit, the lockdown's been very interesting to find alternate ways of communicating with fans. Started a podcast, doing like you said, I have 3 sort of fans a week come on and do these sort of Zoom guitar clinics online and all that kind of stuff. But performing is really in my blood, and I miss it dearly. And it's been fun sort of jamming through some of the old set list on the L1 here in the new studio, which has been fun. So and going back to what you said actually about the ease of setting up and cutting down the sound check time. The last tour I did, I remember it was with 3 other guitar players, and we would race every single show. Whoever got their setup in and sound checked first, it was like a race, because then we'd get backstage and they'd get the best seat and they'd get the best the food, first dibs, and the catering and all of that stuff. So it's a real thing. I mean, why spend more of your life twiddling with knobs than you have to, right? So I appreciate how easy you've appreciate Brian's work adapting this rather complex interface, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I'm a nerd. I've got the Rick Moranis glasses with the tape on right now and everything. But into something very, very simple. And I said at the very beginning, for a guitar player, PA system's a bit of a scary word, and you guys seem to really have changed that and made it a lot more accessible. And kind of jealous of the players just starting out on their journey that won't have to go through such a rigorous learning curve of knobs and buttons. So thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Cred, for really being plugged in to what works out there as well.
Well, we're thrilled to have your support, Mike. We're big fans. So go to Mike's website, go check out his YouTube channel. Where I know that Guitar Player Mag already said he is jaw dropping, but your jaws will literally drop when you not even just hear Mike play some of the arrangements that he plays. For more information on the Bose Pro systems, go to pro.bose.com, select products, and then the L1 family. Very, very comprehensive details and videos about all the L1 products, as well as Sub 1 and Sub 2. Watch videos on our YouTube channel here at Bose Professional for deep dives into each individual system, as well as lots of sort of technical training videos where you can learn like how to set up a couple of subs in cardioid, deep dives on the app, what is submatch, lots of different content for fans of bows to go out there and just learn a little bit more about our products. So with that, I will say thank you everybody for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Craig.
Cheers, guys.
All right. And this is Craig from Bows Pro. We'll see you next time.